All right. Welcome once again. We are so excited to continue on this journey of outwitting the devil. And right now I'm on page 85 and my page keeper Rhonda.
100, page 100.
Page 100 in the PDF. So page 85 on the actual book page. And so, yesterday we really did. It really was a great discussion yesterday. We left off at the bottom of page 85, and the devil was just, we were going through these different areas. He said, just kind of giving us some insight on how he gets people to drift in all of these different areas. And, one thing we come to realize, we talked about yesterday, is that he's not just working on one area at a time, meaning that, he talked about marriage. He talks about, sorry, he talks about marriage. He talks about health. He talks about savings, environment. And these are all areas in which he comes at us from all different angles all the time. And he was basically saying how he gets people to start drifting. And again, in talking about drifting, he's talking about us kind of going along with whatever is told to us, never really truly thinking. And most often, he said, most of those thoughts that we just kind of go along with, they are actually, they're fear based. So bottom line is, he talks about people drifting and not really digging into the rhyme or reason of why they do the things they do or how they do the things they do. And so he says basically people are lazy or indifferent. And we've talked about indifference before. Indifference is really a dangerous place to be. And so picking up on this last question, he starts to introduce the idea of procrastination. It's an ugly word because most people have that somewhere in their lives at some point. I know I am. And it's funny how they make these. He points out a few things so you can identify if this is you, right? And so he'll ask the question. He says, I conclude from what you say that drifting and procrastination are the same. Is that true? And the devil says, yes, that is correct. Any habit which causes one to procrastinate, to put off reaching a definite decision, leads to the habit of drifting. Anything that makes you put off something, right? He says, put off reaching a definite decision leads to the habit of drifting. And I know. Right. It's a ugh. And so Sharon Lecter makes an interesting note here, and she brings back what the devil says about laziness and indifference. And she created this formula, and it says laziness plus indifference equals procrastination, and that equals drifting. Um, and I made a little note, though, here to myself that I don't think it's just laziness necessarily. I think sometimes it could be confusion. Sometimes the devil keeps us in a state of, or we feel like we're in a state of confusion, not quite sure what to do, and so we don't do anything. I feel like there's a lot of other levels to that outside of just not wanting to do it, just feeling like you just don't feel like doing it, of thinking or whatever it may be. But either way, whatever those feelings are, plus being indifferent about it. And we've identified indifference before. Indifference um, is like a numbness, and I've said this before, that numbness and peace are not the same thing. They can feel very similar but it's not. And so going into procrastination, so she gives this little piece here about herself, and that she has said hits a little too close to home. Her excuse was, I work best under pressure. How many of y'all have ever, that's me. That is me. Especially when I was in school, I was blessed to be fairly I could learn pretty easily. I never had to study very hard to get good grades. I could wait till the last minute, cram in everything I needed to know, and I'm good to go. I and that was my story. I worked better at the last minute. Yeah. So definitely I think we can all come to look at Pam. So I'm best closest to my deadlines. That's a great way to say that. Right. But I think we all can point to some of these areas, and the devil is saying, yeah, that's one of the ways I lead you on into drifting, is just procrastination. It keeps getting put off. um it's extremely important, and I want you to think about, as we go through some of this, if you identify your own habits in any of this, that you make a note to yourself about it, and then take some time to create some kind of action plan for it. There are things that I had to put in place for myself, just notes, reminders on my phone, alarms going off, and alarms that would keep going off until it was done, like every minute. There are things that I had to put in place for myself so that I would stop those habits, because I was in the habit of saying, oh, I need to do that, and then I go run with something else. So as we go through this, I want you to think about that, because this is part of how we outwit the devil, is taking actions behind what we learn, not just learning and then saying, oh yeah, that's me, yikes, and then we never do anything else about it. That's what he's hoping we do. That's drifting. Okay. All right. So be sure to do that. And so Hill says, is man the only creature who drifts? Yes. All creatures move in response to definite laws of nature. Man alone defies nature's laws and drifts when he wills. Everything outside the minds of men is controlled by my opposition, by laws so definite that drifting is impossible. So he's saying, God has got everything else under control. Like the tree doesn't get the will or the choice of whether he wants to grow or not. Man is the only ones that have that. And so the devil's like, God's got everything else under control. They don't get a choice. And so it makes drifting impossible in any other area of life. He says, I control the minds of men solely because of their habit of drifting, which is only another way of saying that I control the minds of men only because they neglect or refuse to control and use their own minds. Yep. He says, and so Hill says, then is getting to be, this is getting to be pretty deep stuff for a mere human being. Let us get back to the discussion of something less abstract. Please tell me how this drifting habit affects people in the everyday walks of life, and tell me in terms the average person can understand. And so the devil's like, I'd prefer to keep this very abstract. I don't want to get that detailed. And Hill's like, I'm sure, but tell me anyway. Okay. He says, tell me now what drifting is doing to us as a nation here in the United States. He says, frankly, I may as well tell you that I hate the United States as only the devil can hate. Now, we're about to get into some political stuff here. And let me just say this, we're not using this as a platform to go, we're not talking about any of that, okay? Right now, we're not using this as a political bashing platform, okay? That's not what this is about. We're digging into how we can see where the devil is working, okay? We're not going to talk about anybody specific in this moment, all right? I'm sure I don't have to say that with you all, but I just want to make sure it's on the record, okay? Okay.
I think you said that the first time when we engaged in this book.
Yes. Yeah. So he's getting, but it is kind of another one of those yikes kind of moments, because again, this being written back in 1938, and here we are in the same state today. So he says, this is interesting. The devil says, I hate the United States as only I can hate somebody. And Hill's questioning him about that. And he says the cause was born on July 4th, 1776, when 56 men signed a document which destroyed my chances of controlling the nation. You know that document as the Declaration of Independence. Had it not been for the influence of that damnable document, I would now have a dictator running the country, and I would stop this right to free speech and independent thought that is threatening my rule here on earth. So he says, hey, if it had not been this for this going on right here, we'd be under dictatorship. And he says, that's what I want, because that means people don't get to think for themselves. They really don't. At most of their information is fed to them the way they want it to be fed to them. And you can't do anything outside of those parameters. And so Hill says, am I to understand from what you say that nations controlled by self-appointed dictators belong to your camp? And then he says, there's no self-appointed dictators. I appoint them all. So the devil's like, if they are in power, it's because I put them there. It's because I made sure that the thinking, the environment, that's what he's saying. All of that stuff goes into play in making sure that person gets put in power. He says, moreover, I can manipulate them and direct them in their work. Nations run by my dictators know what they want and take it by force. Look what I've done through Mussolini in Italy. Look what I'm doing through Hitler in Germany. Look what I'm doing through Stalin in Russia. My dictators run those nations for me because the people have been subdued through the habit of thinking. Through the habit of drifting. My dictators do no drifting. That is why they rule for me millions of people under their control. Man, I mean, and you can see how, again, how controversial this would have been, especially in that time. Even if it is now, here where we do have freedom of speech and people can say what they want to say, for him to have been addressing things like Hitler during that time and Stalin and all of this would have surefire, as the devil said, brought a lot of heat. And and then so Hill says, so with these people that are in power, these people that are dictators that you've put in power, he says, what happens if they turned on you? What happens if they turn on you and disavow you? The devil says that will not happen because I have them too well bribed. I am paying each of them with the sop of his own vanity by making him believe he is acting on his own account. That is another trick of mine. And this is interesting. I feel like this, what he's saying is I'm appealing to the fact that they think they got it all under control, that it's them, they did it, right? And there's a fine line right there, because is not that the appeal of success in many arenas, in any arena, especially in business? He's like, my bribery to keep somebody in my control is, he says, making them believe they're acting on their own account, making them think this is all their idea. They did it. They succeeded. You see what I mean? Now, that's not knocking anybody for being proud of yourself that you've made steps. That's fine. That's good. That's okay. But there is an extreme to that in which you forget about what the foundation God built you up on. You forget about the people that around you that helped you. You act like there was nobody except for you, and that you're going to keep it that way. So there's extremes to this, but I think it's an interesting concept that he's saying here, is that appealing to that sense for somebody, the devil calls a bribery. I make sure you get a lot of glory. I make sure that you get a lot of praise. I make sure that you feel like it's all you. And he says, really, that's me behind the scenes, but I keep them in that space. They don't want to let go of that glory. They don't want to let go of that control. Right. So you have to be careful about that. And so Hill says, let's come back to the United States and learn something of what you are doing to convert people into the habit of drifting. And the devil says, right now, I am paving the way for a dictatorship by sowing the seeds of fear and uncertainty in the minds of people. Again, this is one of those things that you would think that no, there's no way that could be possible. But here again, we live in a time in which fear and uncertainty is definitely the best platform, politically, especially, anybody can use. It's the one everybody uses, So he says, through whom are you carrying out your work? This is why I said we got to watch this conversation. Okay. Who are you carrying out your work? Mainly through the president. Mainly through the president. I'm destroying his influence with the people by causing him to drift on the question of a working agreement between employers and employees. If I can induce him to drift for another year, he will be so thoroughly discredited, I can hand over the country to a dictator. If the president continues to drift, I will paralyze personal freedom in the United States, just as I destroyed it in Spain, Italy, Germany, and England. Enough of us have to have this book in our hands, because to be able to really see what is happening politically. But again, what we can say is that this still holds true today, that there's a lot of these subjects that are floating around, and like he says, if he can get the president, whoever is in that position, to drift, if he can get people to feel uncertain and to be so paralyzed with fear that they're ready to put somebody up there who will just do the thinking for them. They're ready to put somebody in charge who will just make the decisions and make it okay for us.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. We're in this. I see Rhonda's got her she's holding your mouth. It's crazy that we're still at the same point. We keep coming, it just keeps going round and round and round again. So Hill says, well, what you say leads me to the conclusion that drifting is a weakness which inevitably ends in failure, whether among individuals or nations. Is that your claim? He says drifting is the most common cause of failure in every walk of life. Let me put my I can control anyone whom I can induce the form of to form the habit of drifting on any subject. The reason for this is twofold. First, the drifter is just as much putty in my hands to be molded into whatever pattern I choose, because drifting destroys the power of individual initiative. So he's identifying a couple things here. The devil is saying that the reason drifting is so easy and I can control people is because first I can get them in a pattern. We've seen this before, right? Patterns, cycles, things that are very similar. It may come in a different form. It may be a different man. Okay. It may be a different woman. It may be a different job. It may be a different environment. It may look different, but you will see the pattern is still the same. Your responses still are the same. The results still are the same. And this is what he's saying. He's like, that's part of what I do. I can mold you and create patterns in your life that you're just so used to, it's easy to run with. It's easy to let the pattern sit there. He says, and that pattern destroys the power of individual initiative, he says. Second, the drifter cannot get help from my opposition because the opposition is not attracted to anything so soft and useless. Ugh. What? But what's he saying here? He's really saying that the truth of the matter is that, yes, you cannot operate in the, God says it himself in his word, that if you're asking me for stuff you don't believe, you're asking amiss, you're being tossed around like waves, you cannot expect to see anything come out of anything that you say or do when you are in that state. The devil just puts it in a way that makes you cringe, but it is the biblical truth. He's like, my opposition isn't attracted to that. And what he's really saying is, you're not able to operate in your power in this state. So the devil's like, this is why I get to control. I set you off in a pattern. You get used to the pattern. You create that habit. Now, all of a sudden, because you have gotten into this pattern, you've given up your power. Now your power, when you think you're trying to use it, is useless. What? Can you identify patterns in your own life? It always seems to, it keeps going the same way, even when you think you're doing something different. We have to examine those. And so Hill says, is that why a few people are wealthy while the majority of people are poor? They're in the cycle, in the pattern, don't have individual initiative because I just fall into the pattern. And the devil says that's exactly the reason. Poverty, like physical illness, is a contagious disease. Y'all hear that? Poverty, like illness, is a contagious disease. What does he mean by that? Poverty begets poverty. The mindset begets the same mindset. And you hear people talk about the company that you keep, right? The people that, because you have to realize, if you're around the same kind of people thinking the same kind of thoughts all the time, eventually that weighs on you and you start to come down. It's very much why, as leaders in business, you have to make sure that you are always rubbing shoulders and hanging around other leaders, not just people that are trying to come into leadership, because sometimes those people and their complaints and their idea of how things can go and what's hard and not hard and all of that kind of stuff, what happens? It will get in the mind of the leader, and all of a sudden you're dropping back down and saying, you know what, that is hard. You know what, I don't know if this can be done. It happens. I see it all the time. It's contagious, the mindset. You have to constantly look at, where is that thought? What is that thought rooted in when you hear it? Remember, this is, and y'all listen, the beauty of all of this is, remember, we were designed to be able to catch this, right? The moment you hear, your mind, the way it works, the moment you hear information, it checks in with the spirit, it checks in with the soul, thinking, hey, do I need to hang on to this? You're supposed to, Holy Spirit, does this belong to me or not? What do I do with this information? You're equipped to do that. So he says, poverty is a contagious disease. You find it always among the drifters, never among those who know what they want and are determined to get just that. it may mean something to you when I call your attention to the fact that the non-drifters, whom I do not control, and those who possess most of the wealth of the world happen to be the same people. So he's saying people that don't think in terms of fear all the time are actually pretty much the same ones that have the wealth as well. So Hill addresses something here. I have always understood that money was the root of all evil, that the poor and the meek would inherit heaven. We've heard this, right? While the wealthy would pass into your hands. So there's this, he's addressing a very like this controversial idea here. Money being the root of all evil, that, people who are poor, he says, and meek, the only thing they can look forward to is enjoying some good food in heaven, that's the only place they're ever going to get any relief, and that the wealthy people are going to hell because money is the root. That and you would think sometimes that is is that very far-fetched or something? No, a lot of people think that way. A lot of churches even preach things very similar to that. As we were talking about a couple of days ago, or a week or so ago, I mentioned the book Thou Shalt Prosper by Rabbi Daniel Lapin, and he was talking about the Jewish culture and their ideas around money and business. And that was one of this really speaks to one of the main things he says people have to unlearn, that the Jewish people don't think it's bad to make money, whereas we can have this culture in which we're kind of angry with the people who have the money because we think they didn't get it the right way. Right?
Right.
That is true. So that's what he's bringing out here, and something that you have to correct that line of thinking. And so the devil says men who know how to get the material things of life generally know how to keep out of the hands of the devil as well. The ability to acquire things is contagious. So he's saying just like being in a poverty mindset is contagious, that being able to accumulate assets is also contagious. Again, who do you keep company with? Right? He says drifters acquire nothing except that which no one else wants. If more people had definite aims and stronger desires for material and spiritual riches, I would have fewer victims. Now, it's interesting to me, though, think about this point here, that the devil puts both of those things together. You would think that he would say, if people had stronger desires for material riches, but he knows material riches by themselves is what keeps us in his corner. Because remember, he talked about people with money that he can use and people with money that he can't use, right? It all depends on what they do with the riches that they have. And so here I find it interesting that he knows good and well it's not just about accumulating something, but if you are a person who can accumulate wealth and you are concerned with their spiritual state as well, that those are going to keep you out of my hands. It's not just one or the other, it's both. And the devil knows it. Those two have to go together. Okay. I'm dropping down past, she corrects, the idea, 1 Timothy 6:10 about the love of money. It's not the love of money. It's it's not money itself, it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. All kinds of evil. the love of it. Okay, so he'll ask a question. He says, I assume from what you say that you do not claim fellowship with the industrial leaders. Evidently they're not friends of yours. He says, friends of mine. I'll tell you what sort of friends of mine they are. They have belted the entire country with good roads, thus bringing into close communion the people of both city and country. They have converted ores into steel, with which they have built the skeletons of great skyscrapers. They have harnessed electrical power and converted it to 1,000 uses, all designed to give man time to think. They have provided through the automobile personal transportation to the humblest citizen, thus giving to everyone the freedom of travel. They have provided every home with instantaneous news of what is happening in all parts of the world through the aid of radio. They have reared libraries in city, town, and hamlet and have filled them with books, giving to all who read a complete outline of the most useful knowledge mankind has gathered from his experiences. They have given the humblest citizen the right to express his own opinion on any subject, anytime, anywhere, without fear of molestation. And they have seen to it that every citizen may help make his own laws, levy his own taxes, and manage his own country through the ballot. These are but some of the things the industrial leaders have done to give every citizen the privilege of becoming a non-drifter. Do you think these men have helped my cause? So the devil is saying that this innovativeness, creativity, things that are used to bridge the gaps between us, things that are used to create communication and community. He's like, all of this stuff, I don't like it. I don't like it. I want people to stay isolated. I want people to stay without knowledge. I want people to stay where I want them to stay. Period. Right. And so, Hill says, well, who are some of these present day non-drifters that you have no control? And so the devil, he says, I have control over no non-drifter, present or past. I control the weak, not those who think for themselves. Now, here we go. About to go for a ride. Y'all ready? Buckle up. Okay.
Ready for takeoff.
All right. Because the devil now comes in. Hill says, describe the drifter. I need to be able to recognize him when I see him, even if I'm looking in the mirror. Okay. I just added that part. Okay. So here's the devil saying, here's what you're going to notice about a drifter. And like I said, make some notes. Okay. Because if we see ourselves, which, I mean, it's okay because we're discovering these places. We're discovering these areas in our life, where we may not have realized we were drifting, so that we can learn to make some action plans and see ourselves. So he says, the first thing you will notice about a drifter is his total lack of major purpose in life. He don't really know what he's here to do. He will be conspicuous by his lack of self-confidence. He will never accomplish anything requiring thought and effort. He spends all he earns and more too, if he can get credit. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. He will be sick or ailing from some real or imaginary cause and calling to high heaven if he suffers the least physical pain. Always sick, always feeling something, always got the sniffles. He will have little or no imagination. He will lack enthusiasm and initiative to begin anything he is not forced to undertake, and he will plainly express his weakness by taking the line of least resistance whenever he can do so. Okay, now y'all remember, it's not all, and it could be or, meaning that you may not fit all of them, but it might be one or two. Okay. All right. So lacks enthusiasm and initiative. He will be ill-tempered and lacking in control over his emotions. That's a pretty blanket statement. I think everybody has room for improvement in those areas. Being able to control your own emotions, mean doing things when you're supposed to do things, not just whether you feel like it or not, or That's what, right? Letting anger make you say something. Oh, he made me say that. They made me go crash into his car, bashing his
I'm feeling a
windshield.
certain way about what you just said. I'm getting a little bit hot under the collar right now.
Uncut,
I'm
right.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Right. So can't lacking control over the emotions, ill-tempered, ill-tempered. His personality will be without magnetism and it will not attract other people. He will have opinions on everything, but accurate knowledge of nothing. Have y'all ever talked to them kind of folks? They got something to say about every single thing, but their information is completely off. And they're adamant about what they know. I've been in a few appointments with people like that. Okay. He says he may be a jack of all trades, but good at none. Got their hands in everything, trying everything, and have not gotten not one thing up off the ground. Uh-oh. He will neglect to cooperate with those around him, even those on whom he must depend for food and shelter. He's always button heads with somebody. He can't ever really, it's just sometimes there's people who, no matter what, this you're going to say the sky is blue, they are going to say the sky is green. They don't care what you say. I don't care how much truth is in it. Right? Those kind. That's what he's saying. He says he will make the same mistake over and over again, never profiting by failure. The pattern. It's the pattern. Never really sees the pattern going on. It says he will be narrow-minded and intolerant on all subjects, ready to crucify those who may disagree with him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He will expect everything of others, but be willing to give little or nothing in return. Always looking for what can benefit me, what benefits me. Everything I see people doing, I look to see how does that help me. He says he may begin many things, but he will complete nothing. Uh-oh. Start stuff, but don't finish it. Anybody got any of those projects around? Start stuff and don't finish it. Yeah. He will be loud in his condemnation of his government, but he will never tell you definitely how it can be improved. This is not just in government. Y'all ever had somebody in your own household, your own team, say, man, you should be doing this. This does not work. I don't like this. I don't like that. Okay, so what should we do? I don't know. They don't have any contribution, but want to tell you what's wrong. Okay. All right. He says he will never reach decisions on anything if he can avoid it. And if he is forced to decide, he will reverse himself at the first opportunity. He cannot stick with his decision, even if he was able to make one. Says he will eat too much and exercise too little. Uh-oh. He will take a drink of liquor if someone else will pay for it. Again, what can I get with giving as little as I can? It says he will gamble if he can do it on the cuff. I mean, if somebody give him some money, if you give me a line of credit, I'll gamble with that. What can you give me? He will criticize others who are succeeding in their chosen calling. In brief, the drifter will work harder to get out of thinking than most others work in earning a good living. He puts just as much energy into figuring out ways to bypass the system and to figuring out ways to just receive rather than give. He says he will tell a lie rather than admit his ignorance on any subject. Yeah, he has to make up that he knows the answer, even though he does not. And if he works for others, he will criticize them to their backs and flatter them to their faces. Well. We've had this is a very descriptive, view of the drifter. Now, let's see. He says, let's see. Well, yeah, we might take a few extra minutes. He says, okay, now I see the drifter. Okay, give your description point by point so I can recognize. Oh, sorry. He says, now I see the drifter. Now let's recognize the non-drifter. I need to be able to identify him. Okay, so now you can give yourself a pat on the back on these that you do fit. Okay, and get in line with the ones that you need to get in line with, right? So he says the first sign of a non-drifter is this: he is always engaged in doing something definite through some well-organized plan, which is definite. So he's got a plan. He knows what he's got to do, and he's always working towards that. He says he has a major goal in life toward which he is always working, and many minor goals, all of which lead toward the central scheme. So he's saying even the little steps lead to the bigger piece. Those goals need to be in line and fit together. And you really do have to take apart your goals and make sure that they're doing that you're not working on 50 million things at one time that really aren't getting you to the one solid place, right? And it says, the tone of his voice, the quickness of his step, the sparkle in his eyes, the quickness of his decisions clearly mark him as a person who knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get it, no matter how long it may take or what price he must pay. Now, this is an interesting piece here, and I point this out every time we read it because I heard Scott say this one time, and I, began to pay attention, and I even for my own self. But he says that you can always, when we're at company events, you can normally pick out an RVP or above, even if they don't have a tag on. And it's because of how they walk. It's because of the directness, the look in the eye. There is a sense of knowing where you're going, even if you're not quite sure. I done led people to a workshop before. I had no clue where it was, but I was headed there. Right? We're going to find it. Okay. On the other side of the dome. Right. You know what I mean? It's just there's a quickness in the step. And I think even in outside, as you're prospecting, I think it's good. That's a really good, really telltale sign of someone who has direction already in their life and has focus in their life by just the way they carry themselves. The posture, like we just talked about, Grace has a posture, right? There's a way in which people carry themselves. And this is what he's saying here. He says, if you ask him questions, he gives you direct answers and never falls back on evasions or resorts to subterfuge. He extends many favors to others, but accepts favors sparingly or not at all. He will be found up front, whether he is playing a game or fighting a war. He's going to lead, right? It says, if he does not know the answer, he will say so frankly. He has a good memory, never offers an alibi for his shortcomings, meaning he's not going to sit here and give excuses. If I messed up, I messed up, right? He never blames others for his mistakes, no matter if they deserve the blame. He's still going to take that on. He used to be known as a go-getter, but in modern times, he's called a go-giver. You will find him running the biggest businesses in town, living on the best street, driving the best automobile, and making his presence felt wherever he happens to be. He is an inspiration to all who come in contact with him, with his mind. The major distinguishing feature of the non-drifter is this: he has a mind of his own and he uses it for all purposes. He has a mind of his own and he uses it. He thinks, does his own thinking. And these last couple of questions here, Hill says, is the non-drifter born with some mental, physical, or spiritual advantage not available to the drifter? No. The major difference between the drifter and the non-drifter is something equally available to both. It is simply the prerogative right of each to use his own mind and think for himself. Bottom line, just as the word says, God is no respecter of persons. So the Hill is asking, do some people get dropped down here on earth that are predestined to be drifters and some not? No. The playing field was always level, because he says it's only one thing that determines the difference between the two, and it is everybody has the right to use their mind to think for themselves. And so Hill says, what brief message would you send to the typical drifter if he wished to be cured, to cure him of this evil habit? He said, I would admonish him to wake up and give. What an answer. He says, if you're drifting and you want to get out of drifting, the best way that you can do that, Hill says, how, give what? And the devil says, some form of service useful to as many people as possible. So he's like, if you want to get out of the habit of drifting, make yourself available to serve. Jesus said, who is the greatest among you? The ones who serve. The ones who serve. And the devil knows it, right? He says, this is how you get out of drifting. You start to serve. He says, so the non-drifter is supposed to give, is he? Yes, if he expects to get, and he must give before he gets. We talked about the law of compensation a couple chapters ago, right? That I put out a service to the world, I give first, and then I am rewarded. Money, recognition, influence, things like that. You give first. And then Hill says, some people doubt that you even exist. The devil says, I wouldn't worry about that if I were you. Those who are ready to be converted from the habit of drifting will recognize the authenticity of this interview by its soundness of counsel. The others are not worth the trouble it would take to convert them. He's like, I'm not concerned. People that are going to sit here, I just gave you all this information, and the only thing you can say is, I don't think you're real. I don't have time for this. I was like, I don't have time for this. If you're really ready to do something about it, you'll recognize you done picked up on some stuff. Right? And Hill says, well, why don't you try to stop me from publishing this confession I'm wringing from you? And Devil says, because that would be the surest of all ways to guarantee you will publish it. I have a better plan than trying to suppress publication of my confession. I will urge you to go ahead with the publication, then sit back and watch you suffer when some of my faithful drifters begin to make things hot for you. I will not need to deny your story. My followers will do that for me. See if they don't. He's like, I always got people on the sidelines waiting to put the pressure on you. I'm not worried about you. Wow. And Sharon Lecter makes a note here as we conclude chapter 3. She says, man, this book, knowing that this took 70 years to publish, she says, I'm intrigued and anxious to learn what else he will reveal. And there are plenty of fireworks still ahead. And yes, there are. And we're just beginning. We are just beginning. So, wow. Drifter and non-drifter. We now see the traits. Now we can look back and start to dig in and get him out of those areas that we need to get him out of. All right, y'all. We're going to stop right there for today.
I can't believe it's already past 11. It's just crazy.
I know. Time goes so fast when we're reading this. Yes. All righty. Anybody have any comments, questions? It's
I'm
a
a
lot.
little upset that I haven't been getting on these a lot earlier. Because that like I guess message, if you will, is really informational and
Yeah.
really like an eye opener,
Yes.
especially for me here lately.
Exactly.
That
If
was
y'all
very helpful.
if y'all haven't if you didn't see Jordan at the last Fast Start School, Jordan is pregnant. She's gonna have her a little bambino here soon. And so yes, specifically, this is great, great timing for you to be learning as her first child. So yeah, it is, Jordan. I think the good news is you can always go back to the replays, but this all of us, as we have read this, each one of us have been able to just say, man, look back and see how it would have been so great to have had this, been armed with this sooner. But the fact is that there is perfect timing in what God is doing and revealing now, and he's giving it to us in a moment in which you're ready. Everybody is ready to do something with it. It's different from just getting this, absorbing it, and then saying, oh, that was great. And there are times in our life in which we've probably been indifferent enough to do that, to get a great sermon, get a great word, get a great teaching. And we sit there with it. We make our notes at the time. We're excited. And then we walk away from it. But it's critical now in this moment. I think God has been preparing us to not just hear, but do, and not that we're even doing in our own strength, but now we are doing in his grace. So he's put everything in motion. So there's no toil on your part in the doing. He's already paved the way for it. So that's a lot of things that actually have to line up in the moment, of success. And so I'm excited to be able to see that. And thank you for sharing that, Jordan. Go ahead, Miss Rhonda.
Okay, so what if you have both? You have a little bit of drifting, you have a little non-drifting. Does that make you a part-time drifter?
Well, the devil says that if I can get you drifting in one place, I'm gonna get you in all the places. So we have to be mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Is it okay to just kind of be half in, half out? I don't know.
No. Some of these I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds a little like me. Darn.
Uh-huh.
Don't realize it sometimes, like, okay.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, to be totally honest, I feel like drifting and non-drifting, like the devil says, if he can get you in one place, he'll get you in all the places. I honestly think that it's kind of one of those things in which, can you live a life totally without sin? Who are we really ever? It's an ongoing personal growth. It's a journey. I think it's truly a journey. As long as we are aware that the enemy is trying to, that he'll be able to get in, I might have a blind spot here. As long as we're constantly working on growth and evolving, I think that's the point of it all, to be able to go back and see, here's where, okay, I didn't see that he could come this way, and keep working on getting there. I don't know that will we all ever be in a place in all areas, yeah. Good point though. All right, y'all.
Well,
I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing how much this book relates to our business in terms of giving and being a service of people. If you think about it, when we first bring in new teammates, it's what do you want? What are your goals and dreams? How can I get you the district leader, this 50% contract level? How can I get you everything before I even start making money with you, because we don't get paid from recruiting. And then just like me and you in coaching yesterday, you know, we go through this whole presentation with somebody, show them how to save money, how to do all this stuff. And you still gonna ask me or say this is too good to be true. I don't have time to convert you to, you know, seeing it, you know, after all this information I just gave you. So I just think it's amazing how it relates to our business as well.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Amen. Awesome. Coach Steph, did you unmute there for a second?
I did. So I got on a little bit behind the schedule, working on some things at the home office, but I was diligent to listen to it on tape so that I would know where we were. That's why the word tells us to pull down every stronghold, every imagination, every thought that exalts itself above the knowledge of God. And as we are learning here, Hill may not call it the Holy Spirit, but we know that that is who he's talking about. And when we are, as we are learning here to listen to that still small voice, some call it that, then that's when, as we're trusting that other self, that it will always guide us into all truth, which the word says, then although in our natural mind, no, we're not ever going, in our natural mind, we're never going to be non-drifters in our natural mind. If we were able to do it, we wouldn't need Christ, okay? Wouldn't need the Holy Spirit. So, but the fact that we do have the greater one living in us, whose role it is to lead and guide us into all truth, then as we're, you know, seeking truth and we're yielding to that leading, we can be aware of and outwit the enemy when we recognize. And that's why this is so important, because it's awareness, bringing to our attention things that perhaps the subtleties that we didn't see. And the kingdom business that, you know, the word tells us to seek first the kingdom of God and his right way of doing things, and then he'll add. Well, I say often that if a principle is applicable anywhere, it is applicable everywhere. And that's what we're looking at, because we're seeing principles that they're set. And as we recognize how they apply in our business, in our marriages, in our lives, with our children, it's the principle that doesn't change, but our awareness of it, and then legislating this word, that whole series, and thank God that he's gifted you the way that he has to take very complex things and make them simple with the how-tos. So engaging with the text, becoming aware, sharing in this space, lifting up the word, digging in and extracting from it things we can squeeze every drop out of the word. And so, yes, we overcome by what? The blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, and not loving our lives even unto death. What does that mean? We don't care if it looks like we're crazy. We don't care if it seems that, you know, what we said was just not the main thought of the masses who are going in a direction that's not our direction. What we know is what we know. If the Holy Spirit said it, that's it, we're doing it. So just the encouragement that we have the mind of Christ. We put on the mind of Christ. And because we've done it, we have penetrated the darkness. And when light comes in, darkness flees. And then as we do that, the light shined in the darkness, the word says, but the darkness comprehended it not. So the ignorance that is around us, and even that which was within us, we overcome that with knowledge and understanding. And I didn't mean to be so lengthy, but I'm just overjoyed at the questions, the level of the questions that are coming forth. And they're deep, deep, deep things. And when each of you share, when we share with each other, everybody has a chance to come up spiritually and grow. Like when you look at a plant, one day it's just nothing in the dirt, and then the next day you've got an inch of growth, and then the next week it's like, oh my God, it's a whole plant. That's what we're witnessing with each other on the call. So it's really beautiful to be able to see and experience that thing.
Amen. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Miss Erin.
I apologize for not being on video. I'm running around with my daughter, of course. We're trying to get away from bippity boppity boo.
Honey, we understand.
Chime in and not take the floor. But we were on a opportunity call yesterday, and I have one of, the individuals that I was, trying to educate, trying to recruit, one of the individuals that work for me. And, she's very aware of our concepts and everything else. But of course, during COVID, I'm just going to give a small backstory. With COVID, yes, she had all her retirement and everything set up. She is she's the go-to for her family. It doesn't matter what it is, and with her congregation and everything, she's part of, everything that they do and volunteer. And she does have children, and, like most of us do. And, she wishes that they would go to, teaches them the right way, and then they decide to go their own way, and feel things out and do those things. And, the book club thing, and same thing with this book, with an opportunity call is, with her, she just wishes that she could, instill those things with, investing and, retirement and things for your future, and, what's good for you. And, 'cause she constantly preaches that, but she also stands by the allowing her children to, they're going to do their own thing. But I wouldn't have been able to say, the things that, children eventually come back. And it's not that they never hear you or hear the things you say. It's, they have to go out and do their own things. And she just said, you know what, I do my part and I let them go. And, I was actually able to say, you have to trust the process. So, same thing with her, she's on the right path, and, she's going to discuss things with her husband, but, and I don't mean to call it a book club, but accelerate, and another reason why I wanted to join is, because she's also very spiritual in those things. And, it's a lot bigger than, just Primerica.
Right. Right.
Educating and those sorts of things. And, I think that she's probably going to allow us as well, to get them on, a call, and at least educate, at least be that go-to. So, an opportunity calls, even if it's just the children, even if it's, still make it heard, make it known. Because I think, even if they're negative thoughts or positive thoughts, eventually they'll come back around, and hopefully not too late.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. That's so, it's a really great, it is the outpouring of what we're doing here that I think it equips us in all these other areas of our life. And, we find these other circumstances. And I think we all often find ourselves in positions where, something we've done on the call, something we've heard on the call, something that has, been able to help us help somebody else, is really what this all is. And you're absolutely right. It does extend so far beyond just the business itself. That was something that was really interesting to me when we started this. My intention, my original thought process was, there are other people in this business that are feeling the same way I'm feeling, or felt the same way I did. And, for me to be able to take you through the journey that I went through when God sat me down for a few years and was like, here's the way I want you to do this. Here's how you need to rethink this. In my mind, it was about the business. But as we started this, and as it began to grow and people began to share, I realized that it wasn't just the business, it was everything. And we were seeing how people just in all different areas of life were applying what was being learned. And so that it reminded me that God is holistic, and he desires that we be holistic, you know, that we honor the way we were created. He doesn't want you to have chaos in one area and peace in another, and that be how life goes for us. So it was just really a blessing to me to watch how this unfolded and healed so many areas for people that were so much bigger than business. And we have people on our call, we have people who listen to the replays who aren't even in our business. And but they can still take and apply what they're learning to whatever area they're in. And that's just been, it's been a tremendous honor and a blessing for that. And as we continue, I'm constantly telling people, now it's like, this is all I hear when you say, you're looking, you're not quite sure how to do this and spiritually, and trying to figure this out. And then I'm like, you should come to our call. You really should come to our call. It's not because it's just something that I did. It's because, man, what the Holy Spirit is doing, because this is his call. This is what he is doing and leading. We on here just happen to be the mouthpiece. So yeah. But thank you, Aaron.
This is the Lord's doing.
Yes.
In our eyes.
Yes.
That's all I think about when I come to this call here. This is all God.
Yes.